story. It's really funny. I was called once again to jury duty a couple of weeks ago. And it seems as if I'm called all the time. And there are people that we know who have never been called. Janie, my wife, has never been called to jury duty, but I get called all the time. My mother gets called all the time, but my father's never been called. And you wonder why that's true. They say it's all random, but I don't believe that. But anyway, so I get called to jury duty once again, and it's really a waste of time because no jury would ever, no lawyer would ever let me on a jury. Never, ever, ever. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. They interview me, and then they send me back downstairs. And where I live, they put these 300 people that are potential jurors in the jury assembly room. And let me tell you about this room. I started to say it's this huge room. It's not really that large considering there are 300 people in the room. It's miserable down there. The lighting is terrible. I know why they put the courts on the 5th and 6th floor of the courthouse. It's so the jurors' eyes have a chance to adjust to the lights whenever they get called up to a jury. And so you sit down there on these hard plastic chairs and you look up and the ceiling's just falling down and there are these lights hanging by their wires over these water pipes, and you think, I wonder how long, you know, that'll cause a problem. Wonder who'll be electrocuted next. And you're sitting there for a week, 300 people wasting their time in this justice by committee system that we have, ready to have a popularity vote on whoever is voted to be guilty. And so we're sitting down there, and I was talking to this law student, and she was down there with me, and I said, well, I'm kind of surprised that they called a law student to be a juror. I wouldn't think they would let you on a jury. And she said, well, as long as I haven't passed the bar yet, they will call me to jury duty, but as soon as I get up there, they'll send me back downstairs. As soon as the lawyers start interviewing me for what they call voir dire, which means they're interviewing potential jurors for a case, as soon as they find out that she knows the law, they'll send her back down. And I think, well, that's interesting. So I say, well, why, if you know the law better than any other jury, why would they send you back downstairs? And she said, well, it's because I know it. She said the lawyers on the case will want to tell the jury their version of the law. And so if I know the law, then I'll know that their version's wrong, and they don't want that. So the more that you know about the law, the less of a good juror that you're going to be in the lawyers' minds. We're going to be right back. I'm going to finish up this story, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Bob Enyart Live, the Godzilla of talk shows. We have some great calls coming up. I want to finish this story about my jury service. You know, they say it's your most important civic responsibility, but if you don't show up, they'll come after you. They'll let murderers go free, but if you miss jury duty, they will hang you. And so, again, I was talking to this law student. They would never let her on the jury, and it's really a bad system. Whenever 12 people vote, or 9, depending on the jury, they vote on whether someone's guilty, but really it's a popularity vote. And you know, murder is not wrong if 12 people vote that it's wrong. Murder is wrong. And we shouldn't have popularity votes to decide whether someone is wrong or right, or something that they did is wrong or right. That's why they have judges. But the problem is the judges, they're like Pontius Pilate. They just wash their hands of whatever case it is, and they say, well, it's the jury's decision. But that doesn't mean anything, because the jurors have no responsibility for anything that they do. And if 12 people vote that someone's guilty, or if 12 people vote that someone's innocent and they're wrong, no one's to blame. You can't go back to the jury and get them, because they're protected under the law. They're not protected from the criminal that comes after the individual jurors, which is always a potential hazard to be on a jury. But they are protected because no one is guilty in our society. Even the criminal, someone murders somebody, they go free a year later, sometimes sooner, sometimes longer, but they go free. And no one is responsible. And letting an innocent person go free because you had a popularity vote and that person was guilty, that is just as bad as letting a murderer go free. Do I have that right? They're letting a murderer go free who is innocent. I said that all wrong. If someone has committed murder and you let them go free, that is just as wrong as someone who didn't commit the murder but you put in jail. That's a bad thing. That is equally wrong, even though a lawyer will say, well, it's better to let a guilty man go free than to let an innocent man hang. Well, it's bad to do both. It's bad to do either. And so what would happen if we had judges that actually made decisions? I mean, what do they call them judges anyway? If they made a decision, then that person would be held accountable for the decision that he makes. And if the judge makes an incorrect decision, if he lets someone go and that person murders again, or if you find out later that person's guilty, the judge should be responsible for that decision. And guess what? We would have a lot more better decisions made if that were the case, if one person were responsible. But no one's responsible. The lawyers, the juries, no one are responsible. And you always hear, well, it's not a perfect system, but it's the best in the world. But no, it's the worst in the world. But if you tell a big lie long enough, everyone starts to believe it. And that's what we're told from cradle to grave. That's what we're told, that it's the best system in the world. And so, you know, you want to ask, why do we have so many murders, violent rapes, violent deaths, all of that? The lawyers basically are corrupt, basically, because they uphold a corrupt law. I mean, I'm sure there are some good lawyers somewhere. I mean, there's got to be, you know, the odds would say that there are. I mean, I'm sure there's a Christian lawyer out there, but there's also probably a Christian murderer somewhere too, or Christian prostitute maybe, I don't know. But so lawyers are corrupt because they, well, for one thing, two words, they plea bargain. They say, well, we'll compromise this person. We'll give you this if you give us that. That's not a good thing to do. Either your person is guilty or your person is innocent, and you should work accordingly. I have a friend who's a lawyer. He's a great guy, and I forgive him of that. He still is a good friend. I have forgiven him. I don't think that he's apologized to his neighbors yet, but I know that there's still time for him to do that. So anyway, the law should be, we have lawyers because the law is hard to understand. And guess what? The lawyers made the law hard to understand. The law should be simple enough for an 8-year-old to understand. You have right and wrong. You either murder or you don't murder. Well, you should not murder. That's right. Do not murder. But we have all these levels. We've got violent rape and date rape and this kind of rape, and you shouldn't trivialize things like that. That's an offense to women to trivialize something like that and say there are different levels of rape. That's a terrible, that's a sick system is what it is. And so we need to fix the law, and one way to do that is to get rid of the jury system, but of course that's probably not going to happen. Today whenever someone rapes somebody, we try to love the rapist and understand the sex offender, and oh, by the way, we'll kill the baby, but we need to baby the rapist and try to understand why he did what he did. That's a very bad thing to do. But back to the juries, one funny thing, the judge would sit there, and whenever we would be called up for a trial, we would be sitting in these real nice plush seats in the jury pool, the jury area, and down in that jury assembly room, the jar, the J-A-R, they stick you in this jar while you're waiting on a jury. And whenever they got up there, the first question the judge would ask would, is there anyone here who has a physical defect or disability that would not allow you to sit through 2 or 3 days of a trial? And I'm sitting there in this leather chair thinking, well, if I had back problems, this is where I'd want to be. I wouldn't want to be back down there in the jar sitting on those hard plastic seats that were made in 1959 with lights hanging over water pipes by the wires on top of me. You know, that's where you'd want to be. Anyway, that was kind of funny. This whole thing, they asked that question because of a very corrupt law called the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's a very destructive system. And it's kind of a personal vendetta of mine that I want to go against this law because it destroys so many people.